as an employee, always keep a brag list. I know it goes against our upbringings, right? We don't want to brag about what we did, but in performance appraisals, it matters because sometimes leaders only remember the last thing that happened, right? It could be a mistake, right?
You are paid for your job and you do your job, right? For us, our performance is measured in terms of what more do you do. So we are expected to take on about 3 to 4 or 3 to 5, I would say, 3 to 5 activities that we will perform over the year, which is above your daily routines.
Welcome to another episode of Our Tech Chronicles. Today we have an exciting topic. It's all about performance appraisals and goal setting. Today we have a special guest, Shanaka. Asanka and Shanaka know each other for many years. I would let Asanka introduce Shanaka.
Thanks, Sean. I'm super excited to introduce Shanaka Vijayveera. He and I go a long way back. I've known him since before college, and in fact, we ended up going to the same college together. So Shanaka is an accomplished HR leader. He brings a wealth of global experience from his work with Nestle's across Switzerland, India, and Sri Lanka. He brings a unique blend of strategic vision and hands-on expertise, promises us that he's going to provide invaluable insight on this topic, especially from HR perspective. So Shanaka, we are super glad to have you. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for putting the bar right up there, and let's have a conversation around.
All right, before we begin, I have a quick question to you both. If you could outsource one part of your job that impacts your performance review, what would it be? Go.
I think writing it, man, it's always challenging for me to write my performance review. It's one thing to do your job, another thing to write it. I think that's gonna be the hardest part for me.
That's a good one. To me, keeping track of all the good things and the bad things and keeping a record of it, I'll probably can use a secretary to do that for all the employees.
Nice. Hey guys, my perspective of it is that never outsource your performance evaluation because it's yours and you lose it.
That's a good
That's
one.
the best answer.
Yes,
It's an opportunity you got. Don't lose it.
Good one.
absolutely. Good one.
All right, so let's start with what is your perspective about performance appraisals, or in some places we call it performance review. Let's go with Shanaka. Let's start with you. What is your perspective about performance appraisals?
Okay, so this it's an interesting area. It's a part of HR in a big way. And before I start off, I would actually like to ask you a question again. Counter question coming in. So every year you basically go through performance appraisals or evaluations. Yeah, and most probably this is April, and last Jan or maybe end of December, you did actually have a performance conversation. Am I correct? Both of you all would have had performance conversations.
Yep.
Either as line managers, you would have had multiple, or you had your own. My question is, what's on the top of your mind of your last performance appraisal?
That's a tough one. Another tough one.
Yeah.
For me, I think I do remember my ratings, right? That's very important. I also remember why I got the rating I received. But one thing I actively do is I do take my development plan seriously. So, I actually track that out throughout the year. I don't want to go to the end of the year and say I haven't done anything. So that's the thing that I really carry forward from that conversation personally. Sean?
That's a good one. To me, Chanaka and Asanka, I do quarterly performance review. I don't know if it's normal, but because it's done quarterly, I remember vividly what's my performance review
That's good.
last quarter has been. So it's been a mixture of deliverables as well as personal goals. Maybe one personal goal I can say is building relationship with my peers and cross-functional teams. As a leader, that was one of my personal goals, which I was doing very poor in that area, because when you're kind of heads down and getting your deliveries done, sometimes you forget the bond that you need to make in order to make your job successful. So I clearly remember that was one of the performance review items that I had last quarter.
Sean, you won't believe this. I have the same one. I'm not kidding. I have the same one this year.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So, Asanka, you most probably recalling after Shan says you didn't have that of a greater performance evaluation conversation with your boss.
Touche.
Don't put me there.
And for Shan, I think that is a best practice, having quarterly discussions. And this is something that is kind of promoted in our organization also. So we have one year end, one mid year, which is very formal. And then we have also check ins. Check ins can be done at any point of time in the year. And most of the time, what we recommend, and this is something that I practice, with my team, I kind of have monthly conversations. I have a monthly one on one with my team, right? So it's like I block 1 hour, I don't talk, they're supposed to talk or they're supposed to express themselves. It's an opportunity for them to, come up and speak whatever they require. It could be, it's an open conversation. So it could be something personal, it could be work, it could be development. Yeah, that's how it works.
That's
And
great point.
definitely that's a great practice if you're doing it quarterly in your company.
Well, I'm lucky.
So
Yeah.
I want to
So
quickly touch on the question you asked, Sean, about why we do performance reviews, right? I think in my mind, end of the day, like organizations and managers, they want high performing teams, and individuals want to be high performers, right? Because that's going to contribute towards your, career growth, going to contribute towards your bonuses, and it defines where you are relative to other contributors in the organization. And I think performance appraisals and goal setting is a really good formal platform and a tool at our disposal to build those high performing teams. I feel like that is the main purpose of the performance appraisal process.
yes, I totally agree with you, Asanka. And also, I feel like, to your point, it's an amazing tool to build a strong bond with the employee and the leader about showing that we care about their personal growth, as well as we be very upfront about our expectation, because it removes ambiguity in terms of like what is expected and why did I get this performance review all of a sudden. So to avoid all that, have very transparent conversation.
Hey, I'll just give you my thoughts on that. It's quite interesting. In my company, we kind of follow a blend of both of these. And yes, so performance evaluation is about what we talk about. What did you achieve, what were you supposed to achieve, and what did you actually achieve. So it's a gap or a overlap or overachieving or whatever it is. And then the other side of it is how do you perform, a what and a how, right? Do you play the game right? Do you actually demonstrate certain competencies in the way it is supposed to be played? So you will have your behaviors. How do you actually kind of use your behaviors in a way that is conducive towards the organization? You can play the game, you could achieve your what by way of playing crook also. Yeah. So did you actually play the crook or did you actually play the game properly? So this we kind of evaluate in a two tier, and that's a nice way of looking at it. Because end of the day, a person's performance will largely depend on the traits of that person and the how they behave. Yeah. So we kind of use about there is about 6 behaviors that we use. We talk about leadership. We talk about connecting with the outside. We talk about being results focused. We talk about collaboration, which the both of you all were saying that you all kind of needed or was an area for improvement. Yeah. Then we also talk about improvement and innovation as a behavior. And lastly, knowing yourself. That's also a pretty big challenge. A lot of people kind of lose out in terms of not really understanding what they are. So one of these behaviors are also assessing yourself as an individual. What's your level of talent you have? What's your level of competency? And then identifying what you need to improve. And that's the development side of it. Yeah.
That's a great point. That's a perfect segue into our topic because vast majority of our audience would probably want to know how they can prepare for success in their performance appraisals. Do you have any thoughts on that, Shanika, from your experience?
Yeah, so very interesting again. Preparation is absolutely key for a performance evaluation conversation. And some people I know get prepared 1 hour before the discussion.
Yes.
And I don't think that's the best way of doing it. So because you're going to be discussing years work, and of course, if you're even if you're discussing a quarter's work, That entails 90 days of work. A performance evaluation is, yes, it is whether you achieved or not. That's the kind of the end result of it. But what is more important is, even if you didn't achieve what you need to achieve in 100%, maybe you only hit 80% or maybe only 70%. But what's important as an organization and as an employee of an organization is that, do you actually have the right approach to things? Because there could be so many other outside factors that couldn't actually make you win the project that you bid for. But did you actually put in the right tools? Did you actually use the right methods? And you still did the right things to get to bidding for the project? Yeah. So kind of that's basically what is kind of important. And so preparation involves, I would say, maybe if you can't do it on a at least on a weekly basis, my thoughts are at least on a weekly basis, you need to have your notes in terms of how have I been progressing on my work, what did I do differently this week, what were the challenges that I actually faced this week. And quite interestingly, in our system, I kind of mentioned, we have a check-in process in the performance appraisal system also. So we have what is called we call it personal development and performance. So we give priority to the development side of it rather than the performance side of it. Because if you actually have your skill sets, then you are inevitably going to be performing, right? So in this, we kind of have a checking system where you could go anytime. There is no set rule. You can go anytime and you can make updates. So every time you have a good achievement, if you have an issue, you have a concern, you could kind of put it down on it. So this forms a diary for your final performance evaluation. So it's very important that you actually prepare, give mind to it, sit down, give some good time to it before you kind of prepare, before you take your performance evaluation discussion.
Yeah, those are really great points, Shanaka. I think just some quick high level ways of that I operate, right? Might not work for everybody. I actually have a spreadsheet like with my own performance objectives and development plan. I kind of revisit that and update it on a certain frequency. I have like time set up in the calendar to do that. And also like when you do a job, like you get these emails, right, from time to time around like your accomplishment. You send out emails on certain things you accomplish. I keep a copy of that on a certain folder so I don't have to go through all of that at the end of the year. So I try to document as much as, or maintain documentation around some evidence, right, of my accomplishments. So it's become easier for me to articulate that when the performance reviews come due. But I think also from a manager's perspective, if you're a manager, performance appraisal process really start the day after you set the goals for your employees, right? Because you want to be tracking the employees' performance like over a period, almost like whether you do monthly check-ins or weekly check-ins, bi-weekly check-ins. All those are opportunities for you to take notes and keep a track of like how your employees are doing. So when it's come to the actual performance review, if some organization have it at the year end, sometimes it bi-yearly, like you look at it more holistically as opposed to just what happened in the last 2 months or last 3 months or the last month, because there's tendency that people tend to skew towards the most recent accomplishments as opposed to throughout the year. So I think I agree with Shanaka what you said. I mean, it's a very involving process which we often overlook, but we should pay more attention to it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, both of you. That note section, I call it brag list. Because as a leader, I actually support everyone to market themselves, right? If they rely on leaders saying, "Oh, my leader knows how I did," and then put a lethargic job at writing a performance review or self review, then it's not going to end well, right? So it is important as an employee, always keep a brag list. I know it goes against our upbringings, right? We don't want to brag about what we did, but in performance appraisals it matters, because sometimes leaders only remember the last thing that happened, right? It could be a mistake,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Another point that I want to mention is turn the mistakes into learnings, right? When they're writing self review, maybe address it, saying, I made this mistake, but it taught me a lot of lessons, and I'm practicing this to avoid that happening in the future, like if you're really in a bit of a trouble for the performance review. All right, the next one, any particular or number of items that you can throw at the audience here. What are the best practices in delivering and or receiving feedback?
Okay.
Go for it,
Thanks.
Shana.
So interesting. My honest thoughts on this is that performance conversations and kind of similar kind of conversations, most of the time you find managers who know it all speaking, you know.
Yes.
And basically what happens is the employee gets bulldozed. And if you do bulldoze, what happens is you're going to kill the creativity, kill the flair of the person. So one of the golden rules on conversations with employees, and I will tell you this, I am a kind of a fan of Simon Sinek. He does leadership talks and he makes a lot of sense in terms of he's very practical. I see him very practical. And what he says is that, and which I also believe totally, is that you need to give opportunity for the person to speak up. In a conversation, a leader or a manager should only talk about 20%, 30%. And you need to give a 70% opportunity to listen. And I think this is one of the golden rules of feedback and conversations. Even if you're giving feedback to somebody, you need to first listen to the perspective of the other person. Then only that you will really understand why somebody does what he or she does, right? And then you kind of basis that you most probably as a leader don't need to speak much because you already understand the perspective of your team member. So it's only a matter of tweaking their thought process, and feedback is about trying to give tweaks to a person, right? So ideally recommended, even in my company we recommend this, and it's a coaching approach that we take in performance conversations. It's largely got to do with asking questions like, how do you think you kind of achieved on this objective? Do you think you went right? What did you do well? What do you think needs to improve? Or what would you do differently? When your team member answers these questions, you immediately know the perspective or the thinking process of your team member. And you, as a leader, you can quickly tweak. You don't have to repeat, you don't have to redo it. You only need to tweak and kind of bring the person into perspective. And the last thing that I want to mention is, as soon as you give opportunity to your team members, they automatically get this feeling of being heard. This is something that is very important. You need to give opportunity for people to speak up, give their views, and that creates not only a good conversation, but it actually creates a good engagement. It gives people automatic value that they are needed, they are wanted, they are heard. That's kind of the crux of having a coaching conversation. And so feedback in a coaching format, that's basically what I kind of recommend.
I think on the other side of the coin is like you're giving the feedback, like as an employee, the same things is kind of apply, right? I mean, you want to also be receiving the feedback. You have to have open mind, and you want to be actively listening for that 20% of the time the leader speak, like because he has done a lot of homework to give you feedback. Like it's not just his opinion. Like he has taken collective feedback from, usually companies do 360 feedback these days. Like you're getting feedback from other people, spend time synthesizing that, finding, thematically what kind of consistent good and negative feedback the person is getting. And you should really listen in and take it positively and find out the areas that you can convert into your development plan for the coming year.
Both of you shared some amazing points, especially the part about Shanaka mentioning like active listening. I think that's every one of us. I mean, I can improve as well because as leaders, sometimes you feel like you have to speak more, but no, in general, like when it comes to performance appraisals, you have to listen because that serves us a lot of purpose as well to understand the underlying, because we are all trying to improve performance as a team. So the two things that I would want to bring is one is to Asaka's point of view. As a employee or a person who is being appraised, we need to be aware of the outcome. It doesn't matter how much effort that is put in if the outcome doesn't come across as successful, because they have to think about from the leadership point of view. These outcomes drive a lot of things in the organization. So it is okay to justify the amount of work we put in and all the reasons that caused it. That is very good feedback to the leader. But at the same time, I would say don't get into too much confrontation, because if the leader does not have a good perspective of the outcome, then we need to figure out how to improve that outcome in the next performance review. So that's important to have that brag list and then prove it. That's one. And the other I was thinking is, as a leader in the performance reviews, we need to think about positives. We call it the plus delta format. So basically, we talk about the pluses, and then we don't call about minus or needs improvement. We say delta. Basically, what we believe, if they can do a little bit more, they can get to the next level. Giving that guidance to the employees so they can, and also putting it as a SMART goal, the acronym SMART, right? Don't have to go through this. It's like achievable goals for the next quarter. And like I said, because we do it quarterly basis, some of them are very small, fun chunks of goals that we set for our employees.
Before we go to the next topic, I just want to remind our listeners, like if you like content like this, please hit the subscribe button.
Thank you, Asanka. We could be discussing something wrong, or we could be missing certain points. So I'm sure the audience have a wealth of knowledge in this topic. So we would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment. All right, next topic. So talking about setting goals, like what are some of the practices you guys follow in breaking it into smaller chunks for the employees to succeed?
Yeah, so I actually have a question here. So I've seen organization use SMART, I think you referenced SMART objectives, as well as the concept of OKRs that was, pioneered by Google. I've seen both. I'm just curious to hear from you guys, what kind of goals that you use in your organizations.
Shanika?
Interesting. I was actually trying to ask you guys to give your thoughts out, but well, I'll give my. It's a different perspective. I'm going to again speak on. So it's quite funny in our organization. We have KPIs. Yeah. So you have the sales guys will have their sales incentives in terms of how much did they sell, did they have market returns, or what was their sales skewness, and so forth. I'm an HR practitioner, so we have lead times on recruitment, number of training hours, and so forth, right? Now, that is considered as KPIs, and that is basically your job. And in our performance evaluations, we have a two-tiered approach to it. So, generally, we don't put our KPIs as a part of our performance and development objectives. Yeah. So, we don't put our KPIs, we don't put our
Interesting.
job down, right? You are paid for your job and you do your job, right? For us, our performance is measured in terms of what more do you do. So we are expected to take on about 3 to 4 or 3 to 5, I would say, 3 to 5 activities that we will perform over the year, which is above your daily routine. So it could be that you actually do a project. It could be that in your work area, you will look at some kind of an efficiency improvement, a digitalization project, right? You're going to automate. You have a system, you're going to automate it, right? So this is the kind of the approach in terms of objective setting that we do it. So it's most sometimes might be a little different. So if you look
I
at
have a
your
question on that.
great, sure, fire through. More the questions you ask and more things that I could most probably clarify if I know it.
I'm pretty intrigued by the fact that you're not including those measurable performance indicators. Just have a question. If you don't have goals that are objective across the board, how do you calibrate within your team that this is a high performer versus this is an average performer, low performer?
So I never said that we are not having a smart objective. It is a smart objective. Yeah. So it will have all the elements of smart. So let's say, as an example, as a facilities person, I have a capex target. Capex is basically capital expenditure, right? So I have a capex target. I would take on an objective of maximizing on my capex targets, right? So it could be on one perspective, it could be on time achievement of capex projects, which is a fairly challenging task. because you're working with multiple projects, contractors, and you need to make sure that all of those people deliver on time. On top of that, you could have a cost target. I already have a budget for, maybe I have a 10 million budget to do something. I'm going to target myself to do that in 9 million. I'm going to save $1 million for the company. So that is a target that I'm going to take on. That is without compromising on quality for sure, right? And that's the perspective that you will have. So within your job, what are you going to improve? So likewise, it could be small improvements, but it is something that you do beyond your daily routine. So you have your daily routine and you have your KPIs for your daily routine, but how do you improve on an overall sense? So when we did our evaluations, I think a third party solution for what we wanted, if it costs X money, we actually were able to get it at half X by way of using the licensed system.
Thank you. I think that's a great example. Yeah.
So I was just trying to say, similarly, everybody is expected to kind of take on either new projects or, it could be an improvement on whatever you're doing. It could be launching a product. If you take people like supply chain, it would be looking at shark savings, and they take on, talking about 100 million to 500 million savings for the year. And then they run multiple projects to make these savings. It could be finding new suppliers. It could be working with your suppliers to improve their process, which will reduce cost for us.
That makes sense because now I can relate. Like my question actually originated from my own experience. Is that I'm not saying current company or it could be past company. OKRs, to Asanka's point. Like as a senior director, I get OKRs published by my leaders, VPs, that invariably would have KPIs in it. Like we have to save certain OPEX this year coming from the budgeting, annual budgeting. Then I basically interpret that and then divide it up in my team and translate it to say things like we have to optimize our processes, we should minimize downtime to certain percentage,
All right. Yeah.
we need to reduce number of bugs so we can avoid cycles. So something that they can anchor to in terms of a measurable number, because I hate to give something that is qualified than quantified, because that's very hard. Then it gets into more of a debate. So now I understand what you're saying. So by the time it gets down to team members, it might be diluted into something that is tangible for them to achieve in terms
Yeah.
of project outcome. Well, thank you guys. I think that's a wrap. Let me just summarize what we discussed. Each of us, we shared our perspective of what performance appraisals is and how employees and managers can prepare effectively. We also touched on certain best practices in delivering and receiving feedback, and then how to set achievable goals. So, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode. Bye.
Thank you. And don't forget your
So
brag list.
Yeah, brag list.